All right, we are starting a new unit on South America in this set of slides, and it's kind of hidden behind my uh, screen there, my picture there. In fact, I think I'll go ahead and get you see me there. I'm here. I'm going to go ahead and close this out so you can see nothing but the slides. So we're going to be looking today at the Caribbean countries and the Guyana Highlands, which are part of South America. So we'll start with this statement. The geographic features of South America have tended to isolate people groups. Next year, when you study world history, we'll talk about how geographic features isolated people groups in places like Greece, for instance. And we'll see later on this year in geography how geographic features isolated people in places like the Balkan Peninsula, which is where Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina, all those places are located. You'll learn about them later. Geography does at times cut one people group off from another people group. And that has tended to be what has taken place in parts of South America. For example, just consider the Andes Mountains. So you're going to have a people that have settled in this region, which is now the nation of Chile, and how they are naturally cut off from the people of Argentina. Now, over time, some of these geographic boundaries have been overcome. Like airplanes and trains and tunnels, things like that, allow us to overcome some of these geographic boundaries. But over time, or in the past, we should say, geographic features have isolated people groups. Well, when you talk about South America, one of the persons you have to talk about is this gentleman. This is Simon Bolivar, who is also known as the Great Liberator. You can see from the note here that he is the greatest hero of Latin America. He helped to liberate countries like Colombia, Venezuela, and Ecuador from Spanish rule in the early 19th century. Since we've been talking about Central America and Latin America, we've learned a lot about how the Spanish conquered parts of Mexico, parts of Central America. They held islands in the Caribbean. And when you go to South America, the same thing is true. They held large portions of land in South America. Well, Simon Bolivar was instrumental in helping to liberate many of these areas from Spanish rule, and these places were able to gain their independence and form countries. Got a short video here for you to watch about Simon Bolivar.
Bogota, Colombia. Cairo, Egypt. New York, New York. Three different cities on three separate continents. Yet all three pay homage to Simón Bolívar, a military and political leader who helped Latin America gain its independence from Spain in the early 19th century. In 1783, Simón Bolívar was born in Caracas, Venezuela, a colony of Spain. He belonged to a social class known as Creoles, wealthy Latin Americans of European descent who owned ranches, mines, and businesses in South America. Bolivar's family owned several gold and copper mines. After the death of his parents, Bolivar moved to Spain and completed his formal education in Europe. It was there that he was first exposed to the Enlightenment ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity, and the concept of representative government that had been forged in the wake of the American and French revolutions. Bolivar longed to liberate his people from Spanish control and bring a representative government to Venezuela. He also sought to abolish slavery, calling it the daughter of darkness. In 1808, after Napoleon Bonaparte named his brother Joseph the King of Spain and all of its colonies, Bolivar joined the fight for Venezuelan independence. The First Republic of Venezuela was established after an uprising in 1810, but it was toppled by Spanish forces in 1812. Bolivar restored the Venezuelan Republic in 1813 after several military engagements known as the Admirable Campaign. During the campaign, Bolivar, in a bold maneuver, led his troops over the Andes Mountains to surprise Spanish forces in Bogota. After a series of victories, his people proclaimed him El Libertador, or the Liberator. Bolivar continued to sweep through Latin America, securing an essential alliance with the Argentinian general José de San Martín. Together, they liberated Peru. In 1825, the Congress of Upper Peru created the Republic of Bolivia to honor Bolivar. In a speech called the Angostura Address, Bolivar said, "The most perfect system of government is that which results in the greatest possible measure of happiness and the maximum of social security and political stability." Bolivar helped create Gran Colombia, a federation that is now the countries of Colombia, Venezuela, Panama, and Ecuador. Although the Federation would ultimately fail, Bolivar acknowledged his people's successful fight for independence, telling them, "Those who served the revolution have plowed the sea." The countries that had formed Gran Colombia went on to govern themselves independently. Simón Bolívar died in 1830. To this day, he stands as a source of inspiration in Latin America and throughout the world for his dedication to the Enlightenment ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity.
All right. So, um, next slide. We are talking about these countries here today: Colombia, Venezuela, and then this set of three countries: Guyana, Suriname, and then sometimes French Guiana or just Guyana. So the Caribbean countries are countries that have a border on the Caribbean Sea. So you can see Colombia has a border, or a coastline, I should say, on the Caribbean Sea, and so does Venezuela. So these are the two Caribbean countries. All right, a little bit about Colombia. You can see that it has dual coasts, as I just mentioned a moment ago, a coast on the Caribbean Sea, but it also has a coast on the Pacific Ocean as well. Just looking at the map, you can tell that it has a mountainous interior. You can see if you look down here that it's the extension of the Andes Mountains into Colombia. And the capital city of Bogota is located in this mountainous region. So there is your capital, Bogota. Colombia is the third leading producer of coffee in the world. And sadly, it is also a location for dangerous drug cartels. These are groups of people that raise and smuggle drugs out of Colombia, and those drugs find their way into the United States, lots of times through Mexico and illegal crossing of the United States border. So this is a particular, this is a big problem for the United States, and so it's not unusual to find um, federal agents working closely with Colombian officials in order to locate and capture the members of these drug cartels in order to try to stop the movement of drugs into the United States. All right, let's move on then to something called the Llanos. Let me back up a slide right quick so you can see it here on the map. Here's the Llanos. So now we go here. You can see the Llanos is broad grasslands that stretch from Colombia and into Venezuela. Again, you can see here on the map. As far as Venezuela is concerned, the capital of Venezuela is Caracas. In the video we just watched a moment ago, we learned that Simon Bolivar was from Caracas. In fact, you can see here that this is his tomb. It is still located here in Caracas. I'll give you just another second to get that. May have moved a little quick. All right, moving on. Whoops, sorry, moving on. Too quick. Here we go. My bad. All right, so still talking about Venezuela. Lake Maracaibo is the largest lake on the continent of South America. It's located in Venezuela, as you can see. Now, this picture is not a picture of Lake Maracaibo. That's something else that we're about to talk about. There are rich oil fields that are located under Lake Maracaibo, making Venezuela very wealthy when it comes to oil. The people yet remain poor because of um, the way that the oil has been, uh, the way that the production has been supervised, the production and the distribution and the sale. And also, Venezuela remains is poor today and in very much trouble today because of the practice of socialism in the country. So you've had you've got situations in Venezuela where you got runaway inflation, you've got low supply of goods, um, and yet, tragically, if they could tap into the oil and if that was correctly handled in the sale and the application, the distribution of it, Venezuela could be a wealthy country. All right, now, this is what the picture is all about. It's a place called Angel Falls. This is the highest waterfall in all of the world. Now, if you've ever seen the movie Up, I'm going to show you this video here in a minute. But if you ever saw the movie Up, that movie was based, at least the scenery was based on the scenery in and around Angel Falls. In fact, I was watching a short documentary one time about the people that were responsible for making the movie Up. They sent a team of artists to Venezuela so they could study the terrain in order to draw the scenery that you find in that movie. Okay, this is a short video clip. I believe it's from the first installment of Planet Earth, which came out years ago.
Growing from humble streams to mighty rivers, it will travel hundreds of miles to the sea. Angel Falls, the highest waterfall in the world. Its waters drop unbroken for almost 1,000 meters. Such is the height of these falls that long before the water reaches the base in the Devil's Canyon, it's blown away as a fine mist.
All right. Okay, next. So we've talked about Colombia, we've talked about Venezuela. Now we're going to talk about these three countries, which are in what's known as the Guiana Highlands. The Guiana Highlands are, you can see, a rugged plateau that separates the Caribbean coast from the Amazon basin. So here's your Caribbean coast, here's your Amazon basin, and so in between the two is this plateau that they have named the Guiana Highlands. Three countries located in the highlands. As you can already guess, they're going to be Guyana, Suriname, and then Guyana, sometimes again referred to as French Guiana. All right. Well, a little bit about Guyana. It was settled by the English. So, one of the few countries in South America that was not settled by the Spanish. So, the English settled Guyana, and it is actually the national language for these people that live there. Okay, next. The indigenous people that live in this region, however, uh, speak their own language. They live in rainforests. You can imagine again that this is tropical climate. We've talked about that. Uh, I think this is the 10-degree parallel, and I believe this is actually the equator here. So you can see it's just north of the equator. Tapewees. Tapewees. These are huge block-shaped mountains that have formed in the Guiana Highlands. The next slide will actually show you a picture of them. Here you can see. This is just a phenomenal mountain, isn't it? I mean, just the shape of it. Um, this is called Mount Roraima. And so you can find this mountain where Venezuela, Guyana, Guyana and Brazil join. So let me back up to that slide. So here is Venezuela, here is Guyana, and here is Brazil. So right here in this area where the three countries join, that's where you would find this mountain. Again, you can tell that it receives quite a bit of moisture here. I mean, it is going to get a lot of rain. And so you get the runoff, which results in these various waterfalls. Okay, well, it's story time. I want to tell you a story about a man by the name of Jim Jones. Guyana was the site of something called the Jonestown suicide murder. Now, this happened in 1978. So this happened, I graduated from high school in May of 1978. And this happened later on in the year. I want to say it was in November. I'm trying to remember now exactly. And it may be that the video we show in a minute gives you the time frame. But I was a freshman in college and I'd gone on a mission trip and I was way up in South Dakota on a mission trip when the news came on about this event. And I remember the pictures that were coming back. It was incredible what had happened. This man's name is Jim Jones. He was a cult leader, and he claimed eventually he made the claim that he was the Messiah. He he set up the headquarters of his cult in San Francisco. But after a while, he decided to take the members of his cult and move to South America. And they moved to Guyana. And he established a small site for them to live. And they named the place Jonestown. Well, let me before I give you that, let me back up and just say this: that after a while, people in the cult began to write letters, and some of these letters made it outside of Guyana and made it back home, and they were expressing their concerns about what was going on in Jonestown, and some of them were expressing concerns about wanting to leave and go home. So a congressman by the name of Ryan assembled a team to go down to Jonestown to investigate the situation, and that's when things got ugly. And when they tried to leave Jonestown and take some of the cult members with them, the cult members wanted to leave, so they were headed to a plane. They were ambushed, and several of these investigators, including the congressman, were murdered. They were killed there at the airport, at the airplane. And then this is what makes it all the more tragic: is Jones then convinced the people to drink Kool-Aid that was laced with cyanide, which is, of course, a lethal poison. And when that happened, there were over 900 followers that died. They committed suicide by drinking this cyanide-laced uh, Kool-Aid. And Jones's body was found, and he died from self-inflicted gunshot. So it's a really tragic story. Now, I found this video. I've used this video with my students in the past, and this is a video that does a pretty good job of recounting the story.
Started as an effort by a charismatic preacher to build a new society, but it ended, of course, with the tragic deaths of more than 900 people. Here's NBC's Joe Fryer.
Jonestown was supposed to be a paradise in the South American jungle. It was anything but.
The saddest part about this tragedy is that good, decent people died who were well-intentioned.
The story begins in America during the 1970s when Jim Jones created a religious movement called People's Temple. The charismatic minister fought for civil rights and had a multiracial family.
It was the original Rainbow family,
including his adopted son, Jim Jones Jr.
Did his message at the time resonate with you?
Yes. No isms, no sexism, racism.
But in the new book, The Road to Jonestown, author Jeff Gwynne details how Jones started to change.
He's convinced himself that he is some sort of superhuman martyr.
Jones persuaded nearly 1,000 followers to move to a remote jungle in Guyana.
The concept was to build a new world,
a socialist utopia.
Jonestown was described as his paradise, and it was not.
Former member Leslie Wagner Wilson says followers were overworked and underfed.
And then as time wore on, I realized that there was no future in Jonestown. Jim became increasingly paranoid.
Jones was obsessed with revolutionary suicide. He felt followers should be prepared to die for their cause, even having them drink fruit punch he claimed was poison.
Only after most of the people drank the liquid did he tell them, it's not poison, I was just testing you.
In November 1978, a concerned congressman, Leo Ryan, flew to Guyana to investigate, accompanied by NBC News. While some followers praised Jonestown, others wanted out.
What is your wish to go? To go back home? And where's home? U.S.
As the congressman left, he took 15 defectors with him, angering Jones.
People play games, friend. They lie. What can I do about lies? Are you people going to leave us? I just beg you, please leave us.
He ordered gunmen to follow the group to the nearby airstrip, where they opened fire. 5 were killed, including Congressman Ryan, NBC correspondent Don Harris, and cameraman Bob Brown. Sound engineer Steve Sung and field producer Robert Flick escaped, as did Ryan aide and future Congresswoman Jackie Spear. Back at the commune, Jones gathered his followers for a final sermon.
We've had as much of this world as you're going to get. Let's just be done with it. Let's be done with the agony of it.
This time, Jones served a punch spiked with cyanide. More than 900 died, 300 of them children. Jones shot himself.
We know from autopsies conducted later that a considerable number of people were held and forcibly injected with the poison.
In the end, how many relatives did you lose?
I lost 11 relatives.
Wagner Wilson and her 3-year-old lived because they were part of a small group that escaped during the confusion that morning, hiking through more than 30 miles of dense jungle to safety.
How scared were you to try to escape?
I was terrified. I was waiting for a bullet to hit at any moment. I was prepared to die on that day.
I don't know how I can ever describe it in words.
Jim Jones Jr., 18 at the time, lost his wife, but he lived because he was in Georgetown, Guyana's capital, as part of his frequent public relations work for the temple.
So the million-dollar question is, would I have done it? I can't say I would, but I can't say I wouldn't have.
That shows how much power Jones had.
And part of that, I believe, is because we all are looking for a place to fit into the world. We're looking for love. We're looking for acceptance. And Jim Jones provided that.
Today, a memorial in Oakland serves as a remembrance for those who died, predominantly African Americans and the elderly, whom Jones's initial message resonated with.
I think the lessons of Jonestown is to really go within so you don't have to go without.
It's better to live for a cause than die for it.
Despite what happened, the minister's son still goes by the name Jim Jones Jr.
I'm proud of the upbringing and the education I was given. That's a lot to be proud of. I also have to accept the horrific tragedy that my father caused, but he caused it, not me.
For Today, Joe Fryer, NBC News.
Well, looking back, I remember the headlines around that time, and it was just, you almost couldn't even get your arms around the idea of what had happened there.
It's unfathomable. I don't think there's been anything like that since. It's just
It's so many minors, over 300 children. Yeah.
so sad.
Hello.
All right. Okay. Let's see. Back to this then. All right. So Suriname is this country here. You can see how it's pronounced, Suriname, formerly called Dutch Guiana. So that would give you an idea of who settled this region. So Guyana was settled by the English, Suriname settled by the Dutch. It has the fewest people per square mile of any country on the continent. So a very low population density. Not many people. Make sure you have that. Okay, now we move on to Guyana, formerly called French Guiana. And it is the only part of the continent that is still under European control. So it is considered a territory of France. One of the features of Guyana is Devil's Island, which is just off the coast of Guyana, and it is or was no longer used this way. But up until 1946, it was an island prison, uh, much like what Alcatraz is in the San Francisco Bay. Some of you may have been to San Francisco and you've seen Alcatraz from a distance. It's almost impossible to escape Alcatraz. And same thing would have been true about Devil's Island. All right, that brings this set of slides then to a close. So tomorrow we will do another set of slides on another part of South America. So your substitute teacher now will tell you what you can do to finish out the class period.